Brett, thank you so much for taking the time on your busy day to hop on and converse for a little bit. Before we get into it, do you mind telling everybody just a little bit about yourself, your background, some key points that we should know?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Tobias, thanks for having me
Mhm.
on. Great to be here. I guess I have an interesting, but I think it's an interesting background anyway. Probably nobody else might, but I think it's an interesting background. So I wear a couple of hats. I am the president of Dogs Trust USA, which is an animal welfare charity, dog welfare charity here in the US, part of a global Dogs Trust group. And that's where I spend most of my time these days. My background, though, is as an accountant originally and then as a business advisor. So I still do some coaching. I've lived in Dubai, I've lived in the UK, and I've still got clients in Dubai. So I spend quite a bit of time as an executive coach and a business consultant working with those clients as well. But my principal effort these days is as president of Dogs Trust USA, which is kind of exciting and kind of cool.
So it sounds like you've then been coaching or in those leadership positions for quite a long time.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
what got you into that? Is that always something you've been interested in, or did you kind of fall into it? What happened there? What's the story?
I mean, it genuinely went from being a vanilla accountant,
Mm.
which I never considered myself to be. So where I really enjoyed my work as an accountant was I always felt that I needed to have the knowledge, and you should always have the knowledge. But then working with different clients and helping them to fix stuff. And often, people say, you meet someone in a bar and they say, what do you do? And I say, I fix stuff. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but at the end of the day, when we're working with our clients, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a coach, you are helping to fix stuff. You're helping to make them grow. You're helping to fix a particular problem in their business, whether it's cash flow, whether it's staffing, whether it's management, whatever it might be. You're there to help them fix stuff. So all of these years as a business advisor, and then moving away, going to the UK, becoming finance director, and then going over to Dubai. Right. Well, what do I do now? I still had my connections to Dogs Trust, and that was wonderful. And I'm really grateful to have maintained those. But I decided that no, it's time to actually go into coaching and do a little bit of training. And I've always loved it. That's the thing that's really got me out of bed. I like to, this sounds really arrogant, but I like to know more technically than the person next to me, because that way I feel like that gives me the confidence to have the conversation. But then once I've got that confidence to have the conversation, it's where you're working with someone and you look back 6 months down the track and you go, that just wasn't a consulting assignment. And a lot of consultants come in and pillage their finances, get big bills, walk away and don't care. But when you can actually see the change that you've made, oh my God, that's so fulfilling. And so, and I've been very fortunate, a couple of my clients from Dubai, I'm living in Washington, DC now. It would have been very easy for them to say, see you later. But they've wanted to maintain the relationship, which has been absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to head over and see a couple of them in January, which will be amazing.
What was that experience like then, going from London? You have the CFO position, probably sitting pretty comfortable. You've got a place that you love, to then go to Dubai and decide to then start an entrepreneurial journey to study the coaching. How did that feel? You mentioned you enjoy knowing more than the person next to you, which I think is so valid, especially when it comes to coaching. But did you ever then have a little bit of imposter syndrome when you first jumped over?
No, I didn't, genuinely. And again, that may sound arrogant. And look, my situation, I'm very grateful for. We were in the situation, obviously I'm older in life. I'm not 30 or 40 anymore. I turned 60, I'm almost 61 now.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And so I was in the situation where it didn't matter whether I failed or succeeded, as whether I could put food on the table. And there's nothing like having that capacity to give you the confidence to go out there and give it a try. And I guess the second thing for me as well was that I was very clear about what I was and what I intended to be and what I would not be. And that's not right for everybody. So let me explain if I can. So the coaching that I do with clients is very much based on, okay, you've got a problem, come and let's talk about it and we'll work through it. So it is solutions based. I don't necessarily provide the solutions because I don't think a coach should do that. That's an advisor's job, not a coach's job. But to ask the right questions, to test and prod and temperature check, and are you sure? Have you considered this angle to that particular problem? That's where I felt that my sweet spot was. It was not running a program of 15 modules, consistent modules, and I'm going to run that same program with everybody. That's not me. I didn't want it to be me. I wanted it to be very much focused at the CEO or senior management level, being that person that they could confide in, that they don't have necessarily, certainly within their organization, someone that they can confide in. Any CEO will tell you it is a very lonely office. There's not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure you have your contacts, perhaps you have a mentor outside the organization, as you should, but it is a lonely place. And, you know, more often than not, I say, I know what it's like. It's like there's that door on the corner, that little cupboard in the corner there, and your team expects you to have some magic dust. So when that big problem arises, you've got to somehow get that magic dust out and spray it around and you can fix everything. And life is not like that. So there are times as a CEO where you are a little unsure as to the direction that you should go or particular issues that you should face. And to be the person that can be the sounding board for that, not necessarily to tell, okay, come back to the same point, not telling them what to do, but asking the right questions so that they can make the best decision. And then, as the cliche says, once you've made the decision, make it the right decision, which is a really important part of this as well. And to give you a good example, if I might, I was working with a client. It was a recruitment firm, quite a significant recruitment firm. And that particular client was doing very well. I was asked to go along and talk to their management team on some things. And there was a particular individual in that room who was just not on board during the meeting, making jokes, making fun. And you could see all the rest of his colleagues were kind of a little bit uncomfortable with all of that. And I spoke to the CEO afterwards and I said, I'll just call the guy Jim. What was Jim's problem? You know, I was really close. This is the first time I met this. I was really close to just saying, mate, if you don't want to be here, the door's in the corner, walk through it. And he said, look, thank you for asking me because I don't know what to do about Jim. He's my best performer. He is my best. He makes the best numbers, but he is influencing all of the others in a bad way. And, you know, part of me wants to get rid of him, but part of me also says, I see the numbers. So, you know, we worked through the process, and as you can probably gather, where we got to in the end was a position where we said, overall, you can't, the end of the day, you cannot have a culture killer. So you're going to have to go backwards here in order to create the sort of culture that you want. And excuse my language, it's a little bit like some sporting teams apply a no dickheads policy, which is basically, we're going to have people on the team that we want to have on the team, whether they're necessarily the best in their positions. It is important, but it's not as important as having the right mentality, the right attitude that's going to bring everybody forward and not bring it down. So just because they happen to be the best in their position doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve to be on the team. So will versus skill. They might have the best skill, but have they got the willingness and the culture, the empathy with the rest of their crew and the coaching themselves? If they're the best, how can they coach the rest of the team and the rest of their colleagues to move it forward? So it's a long-winded way of saying that's what I wanted to do. It wasn't a modular type system. Nothing wrong with a modular type system. Absolutely the right thing, particularly with sort of mid-tier managers. I think that works particularly well because there's a consistency in the way it's delivered. There's a consistency in the output, and that's particularly important. Just not right for me.
Definitely. And it sounds like, too, correct me if I'm wrong, there seems to be a little bit of not therapizing, but in that sounding board, do you feel like it's that active listening, it's that really just reflecting and letting them speak and just work through their ideas in that sense? Or how would you, I guess, define your coaching style more so than just like, I'm here to listen and ask good questions?
The first thing I would say is brutal honesty.
There you go.
So that's the first thing. But don't confuse honesty with advice. So if I think that they're going down an incorrect path, or they're not considering every element, I'm going to ask them questions, probing questions we spoke about before, to try and understand why they've come to that decision. And I guess this is getting into the advisory space a little bit, but the worst thing that you can do is sit on your hands and go away from the meeting and go, oh, I wish they wouldn't do that. Well, you have to tell them, and it is their decision. Okay? It's really important to understand that it is not your business. You as the coach will never understand their business as well as they do. Particularly often in my case, I'm dealing with founders often. So, they've started the business from scratch, and like in the whole founder syndrome, I've now 25 people. How do I get to 50? I can't run it the same way. So that's where I can come in and help them, or perhaps it's 100 or 200, whatever the number might be. So it's those transitions through the business cycle. So for me, it is brutal honesty, so that they get to hear what I think, and the honesty might be a question, or it might be a statement, but it has to be honest, and that's really important. But then they make the decision. It's a bit like the old selling technique, past selling technique that I learned many, many years ago. I'm convinced that this is going to help you. Let me show you all about it, and then you can decide. So the power goes back to them, and in a way, it's not totally dissimilar to that type of style.
And in doing this, what have you learned about performance? How would you classify then a high performer? What does that mean to you?
So the first thing to say is it's about output. It's not about hours. And this can apply to any level of organization. I mean, the best organizations, not always, there's always exceptions, but the best organizations are the ones that make money while you sleep. And generate cash. They're the best organizations. You're not collecting debtors. You're not, dealing with huge capital investment. Doesn't mean that you can't have very successful businesses that are highly capital intensive. There are many examples of that going around. But the sort of business I love to be, if I could, was the business that makes you money while you sleep. How great! But I guess some of the key traits that I see in high performers are, it is very much about what they do, not what they say that they will do. And this is where culture comes into play as well, because they adopt a similar kind of culture with their management team, and perhaps their management team down way. Where it comes unstuck is where you have multiple cultures within the one organization, and that is a no-no. So the leader's job, to use the old Simon Sinek, golden circle, the leader's job is to work out the why. Why are we doing this? Sell the mission, sell the dream. It's not necessarily the how or the what. It's very much about the why. And to quote another great book, Jim Collins, Good to Great. It's about working out what are the best seats on the bus. What seats do we actually need? And then obviously you fill them with the right people. That's not always your role as a CEO, but how do I assess a CEO or their managers? I look at what they do, not what they say. I look at the structures that they put in place. I look at the culture. I look at the values. And values, and I know this is a bit of a tangent here, but I'm very passionate about values. And to me, the worst sort of values are, our value is integrity and our value is innovation. Really? Is that all you've got? Because it is assumed that you're going to operate with integrity. It is assumed that you're going to be innovative. So you've got to differentiate yourself in some way. So what is it? When we're at our best, what do we look like? And that will drive towards your values. when we are at our worst, what do we look like? And then that will drive towards our values. So they're two interesting questions to ask. I know I'm kind of going off track there, but it does all lead back to how I view an organization and how I view performance. But it has to ultimately as well be measured against a set of criteria, whatever that criteria is. Financial has to be in there. I'm going to say that as an old accountant. If you would be not, you can have the best culture in the world. You can have, everything's wonderful. We're such a happy place to be, and we just went out of business. So we have to be realistic about that.
And I'd be curious then as to, have you picked up tricks or habits from the high performers that you've worked with that show a similar, or what are the skills that they have that then attribute to their high performance?
So I think making, one of the tricks of a high performer is being sure that they do build that exercise routine into their lives. I'm very much a firm believer in travel, and I know this sounds really kind of odd, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that, great to say you should travel more. Not everyone can afford that. I get that, but where you can, travel. Experience different cultures, because in experiencing different cultures in different ways of working, it's amazing how you can bring that difference into your own workplace. I mean, one of the things I've found here working in the US, and please don't take this as a criticism at all, because it has its advantages. It's very much a yes sir, yes ma'am type of environment. So you need to create a culture where there is criticism, where there is suggestion, where there is an open environment to be able to debate and discuss. So long as ultimately, once you've been through that process, then a decision is made, then we all own the decision. I can remember a CEO I worked for, and I was effectively 2IC in the firm. CEO I worked for, we'd have discussions amongst the management team, and sometimes we'd be arguing like, tooth and nail. No, and I still would think that it was the wrong decision. But the moment that you left the CEO's office, it's the right decision. And that's important. So it's important to have that openness to be able to have those discussions. But then once you've made a decision, we're all on board with that decision. A cliche I use with some of my clients in this space, and this comes back to traits of a strong performer. Is it's like the train leaving the platform. Okay, you've probably heard this one before. So we've made the decision. Okay, let's not have the water cooler seminar to discuss what's going on. You are now going to make an active decision, whether it's subconscious or in the front of mind. It's a decision to either get on that train or stay on the platform, and either is okay. If it's such a critical decision that it means that you're not comfortable to work in that environment anymore and you completely disagree, get on the platform. In other words, decide to leave the organization. But one thing that you will not accept as a senior leader is someone that has one foot on the train and one foot on the platform. Because, as the metaphor or the analogy, or whatever you'd like to call it goes, that's where problems happen. For the individual and for the organization. So there are some things that are up for debate, and there are some things that are not, and that's one thing that's not. So that certainly is sort of one of the things that I think is right. I think other high performing traits, creating an environment where there is support for your senior leaders. So one thing that I think is important is that we can't all be operating at 100% effectiveness all of the time. That is simply not realistic. Life gets in the way. Health issues come up, relationship problems come up, mental health issues come up, whatever it might be, there are always going to be some bumps in the road. But the stronger, those that have a history of strong performance with you deserve your support. And there are times where we have to, as a management team, bring everybody up and put our arms figuratively around them and help them through the next few months, do extras so that we can get them through, because they've got a proven track record of performance, and we'll get them to the other side. And then guess what happens when you then hit the wall about something? The same kind of thing applies. So we support each other. So I think that's actually really important. I think another thing here is deal with things when they arise. Don't let them pass. Act. Otherwise, you won't, maintain respect. Be the keeper of the culture. You are ultimately the keeper of the culture. Test the culture regularly. Temperature check the culture. Ask your management team, how are things at the moment? Is it a 6 out of 10 out there? Is it an 8 out of 10? Where are we sitting? What do we do that we might need to change?
I feel like I'm learning so much, and I hope everyone listening is learning a ton too. And I want to ask then, so when you think about your own personal performance, right?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about your exercise, talked a little bit about diet.
Yep.
How do you then maintain a high level of performance for yourself? And how have you seen that change over the years?
I mean, I can be brutal here and say, how do you measure your own performance? Well, do your clients keep coming back? That's the ultimate test, isn't it? Do they keep coming back? But in a general sense, your clients will be the best judge of your own performance. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think for me, maintaining performance is doing something that I'm really interested in. So you have, and it's an old, I keep using the word cliche. It is an old cliche. You have to do something that gets you up in the morning. And if you're not doing something that's getting you up in the morning, the chances are your performance, even if it's 1 or 2% off, your performance is not going to be there. So I look at the work that I do for Dogs Trust. I'm a passionate dog person, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, leading the charity out here. But the work that we're doing internationally around the elimination of rabies is just so inspiring, And if I might just talk very briefly about that. So rabies is one of these very, it's a dreadful disease. It's the world's most deadly zoonotic disease. The world's most deadly disease that comes from animals. 99% of all human deaths from rabies are dog bites. So even though any mammal can carry rabies, it is almost inevitably a dog that is going to cause it. We've been chatting now for, 45 minutes or so, or perhaps a bit less. So in that time, there's probably been about 4 or 5 people that have died of rabies around the world. So it's 1 every 9 minutes. So it's an extraordinary statistic. So what gets me up is the fact that we can save a whole lot of dogs' lives by vaccinating them for rabies, but that's not really where the saving happens. Where the saving happens is because they're not being culled or mistreated in rabies endemic countries. But equally, and just as importantly, and arguably more importantly, we're also saving human lives. So, with our partner, WVS and their Mission Rabies project, they are vaccinating dogs in rabies endemic countries right around the world, and our support for that is so important. I actually led on the merger of bringing those 2 organisations into the Dogs Trust family in 2023. It's probably one of my proudest achievements. We'd supported them for years as a charity, but now having them as part of the family and being able to provide extra support, and my work here to try and raise as much money as we can at dogstrust.com. Sorry, dogstrustusa.org. dogstrustusa.org if anyone would like to make a donation. It's proven in Goa in India, state in India, it's now rabies free through the work that's been done. Our campaign in Phnom Penh and the provinces of Cambodia recently finished. And we vaccinated around about 220,000 dogs in 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
Think about that. 200, let's think for a second, 220,000 dogs in 2 weeks. Mass vaccination campaign. But there's work in Malawi. So I've vaccinated dogs in Malawi in Africa. There's huge work in India happening, right around Southeast Asia. I spent a week in the slums of Mumbai vaccinating dogs for rabies with colleagues. And it is such a wonderful experience that I'm so grateful for having. But now to be able to raise money for that work is just incredible. They'll vaccinate 1.1 million dogs this year, and they will educate around about 4 million people, because education is as important as vaccination. And, what to do if you get bitten, and how to avoid getting bitten, and how to recognize a rabid dog, all those sorts of things. So yeah, as you can gather, I'll stop there, but as you can gather, I'm pretty passionate about it, and it is a wonderful thing to be able to help dogs and to be able to help humans at the same time. So that's why I guess it gets me up in the day. So I'm technically working 2 days a week for Dogs Trust USA. I work a hell of a lot more than that, because I believe in the cause. I believe in what they're doing. It's scientifically based. They work with CDC as well here in the US through the International Rabies Task Force. So, it is such a wonderful program. They also provide access to veterinary care in places where it's either not present or it's just simply unaffordable. So, and a lot of that's training vets. So they train over 2,000 vets a year through 5 international training centres around the world. But it doesn't come cheap. None of that comes cheap. So we raise a lot of money for that. Anyway, enough of my charity work. I can talk about that all day.
No, but that's important, and I think it's a telltale sign of high performances. Are you passionate? Again, we kind of go back to this purpose talk. What's the purpose? Are you passionate about it? Is this, like what you said, something that gets you out of bed? And how do we then maximize our time doing what we love?
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it's a little bit. I'll bring this back to what I spoke about before, about me being the right coach for some people, but not for everybody. And it's a little bit like that with our charity work. We are a small charity in the US, massive globally, small charity here in the US. So we can't do everything for dogs. We can't. So we have to choose our sweet spot. So for us, it's controlling dog populations humanely. So spay and neuter. So dogs don't end up in shelters. So we stop the problem at its source. And also, reducing the number of dogs that are mistreated, and providing access to veterinary care as well. So we do that through partners here in the US. We have to set a strategy, and we have to be honest. And I've had lots of people talk to me, say, "It'd be wonderful if you could do that." I'd love to do more, but I would prefer to do 1 or 2 things really well, rather than the old cliche again, rather than spread myself too thin. So same thing with my consulting work. So as a high performer, how do you judge yourself? Well, make sure that you set your strategy. Doesn't mean it's set and forget. You can move it around if it makes sense. But the bar to move the strategy around has to be high. That's important. Once you've set your strategy, the bar to change it should be high. Then be honest with your clients, be honest with yourself, and stick to your strategy unless there are valid reasons why you should move away from it. And then test your performance by talking to those that you trust. So in my case, obviously, as we spoke about, you get your feedback back from your clients, but talk to others as well. I'm in the fortunate position where I work very closely with the CEO of Dogs Trust in the UK. We catch up on a regular basis, so I'm able to get feedback directly from it in a kind of a more traditional way, I suppose, that way. But speak to people that you trust, get their views, and when I say trust, it comes back to honesty, trust, and we'll tell it to you like it is. Not necessarily going to gild the lily. You don't want yes men or yes women. You want people that are going to tell you what it is. And you never stop learning. I mean, it'd be so easy at almost 61 to go, I know everything. I know nothing. I know nothing. You've got to keep learning. You've got to keep, set clear agendas. Simple things. You've all heard them. End of the day, I still do it. The last thing I do before I close my computer is I write down my list for the next day. What are the things that I want to achieve tomorrow? I don't always achieve. In fact, I rarely achieve them the next day. But at least I've got some sort of agenda, some kind of path, some kind of process, some kind of prioritization about what's important. But probably to end this little bit, I would say there is also ultimately the thing where you just have to do it. Just bloody do it. Stop making excuses. I procrastinate like everybody else, but you asked me offline, how do I prepare for a big meeting? Confidence is important. Where does confidence come from? Preparation. Understand your audience. Do you know how to spell their names? Is it Mrs. Jones or is it Mary Jones?
So as we end up today, I want to ask you one last question. What would be a daily task or habit, something that you would recommend for someone who is a high performer or is working their way into that space? What's one thing you would say, all right, do this every day? Or don't do this every day?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to come back to something I said before, and I think it's exercise. I really do. I think it's there are many things that you can and should do, but I genuinely believe that you will have longevity through being sure that you do exercise. Hopefully what's come across in me speaking to you is passion. So be a coach. Everyone should be a coach. Everyone should impart their knowledge and their skills. Don't keep it to yourself. Be the person that shares. Don't be the person that keeps it to yourself. So, because I personally, for me, I love sharing, not necessarily knowledge, but sharing experience and asking hard questions and doing all of that sort of stuff, because that's how you get better. And that's what I want people to do with me as well. We're none of us are immune to that. Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thanks, Tobias. It's been great chatting. I know I've rambled on a lot in this conversation, but it's been great to talk through some of this stuff with you.
No, definitely. Yeah. Again, I really appreciate your wisdom and your feedback. Thank you so much.
No worries at all.